XFL fanatics. This is XFL Game Day. I'm David Hashagen, joined this week by Alex Marinoni. We will hear from Troy Anthony and Scott Churchton later on in the program. Emery Hunt is on location this week at the NFL Scouting Combine. Well, Alex, just when you think we've got everything figured out in the XFL, Week 3 comes along, and all of our conceptions of what is reality gets completely flipped on their head.
Absolutely. I don't think there is a single person out there, XFL expert of any kind, that saw DC going down the way they did out in LA.
Absolutely incredible. A huge crowd as well from St. Louis. And that's where we're going to start because we're going to do a little buy or sell here. After 3 crazy weeks, let's start with the St. Louis Battlehawks. Are they the most complete team in the XFL? A lot of talk about Houston, but St. Louis has the running game that a lot of teams don't.
Yeah, that's a good question here and a good buy or sell, because if you asked me this last week, I would have said, you know what, they're not even the best in their division. I think the DC Defenders are, but then you saw the egg they laid, and you look at just what the Battlehawks have been able to do on both sides of the ball. It's really tough to really argue that they're not, but I think right now that belongs to the Roughnecks still, so I am going to sell that, but the Battlehawks have definitely jumped up those rankings and could possibly be the number 2 team overall in the XFL.
So the margin is shrinking a little bit between Houston and St. Louis is what you're saying.
I would say so, and the Vipers really gave a good run to the Roughnecks last week and caught the Roughnecks on their first road game the way they did, and it almost gave them a scare. So that would have been something that could have impacted it, but the fact that they were able to come away with that win shows what kind of a complete team they are, and the Battlehawks did take care of things at home against a Guardians team on the down, so I can't have them jump too much, but I think they're definitely in the conversation.
Let's move on to the second buy or sell here. LA, another good game for them with Josh Johnson in charge, but they will catch the Houston Roughnecks in the West. Buy or sell that?
I'm going to sell this, but only because they dropped Game 2 to the Renegades. Had they been able to come away with that win, maybe Elijah Hood hold on to the football the way they were playing, they could have won that game. I would have said maybe, but already the Roughnecks at 3-0, LA in a 1-2 hole. I don't doubt that they can make the playoffs out of the West, a really tough West, but I do believe that they will not catch the Roughnecks, because the Roughnecks right now have shown no signs of slowing down, and even when they do look a little bit vulnerable, P.J. Walker steps up and takes care of business.
P.J. Walker's decently good at football, I think.
I would say he's not too bad.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Although in the West there are some questions at some other quarterback positions, and that leads us to Seattle. Brandon Silvers will keep the starting job for the entire season. Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell this. I think they really want Brandon Silvers to be their guy. I do believe that, and you see them allowing him to work through those struggles. But at some point, they're going to get into a position there in the West where they feel like they need to make a playoff push. And if he's not stepping up, I could see B.J. Daniels, an accomplished quarterback in college, a guy that spent some time in the NFL, heck, has a Super Bowl ring. So he's a guy that's been around winning in the Seattle area. I could see B.J. Daniels getting a shot here if Silvers doesn't step up. I'm going to buy that. He doesn't make it all the way through.
And definitely with Daniels, you're talking about a guy who's not a kid like some of the other quarterbacks in this league. He's 30 years old, so he's got the experience not only with the Super Bowl champion Seahawks, right, but across the board. So it'll be interesting to see if Silver survives, because the defense in Seattle has been excellent. The offense, not so much.
Absolutely.
Pretty up and down. But that brings us into our next segment, and it's time for the Power Rankings. Alex, if people don't follow you on Twitter, where can they follow you on Twitter, by the way?
I'm at Marinoni10. You can see us there.
And you've got all of the Power Rankings, but now let's take a look at 5 through 1 in terms of the quarterbacks in this league. Starting with Landry Jones at number 5, Josh Johnson at 4, Cardale Jones now at number 3, behind Jordan Ta'amu, and P.J. Walker still number 1. Let's talk about that 2-3 dynamic. Cardale Jones lit up the league the first 2 weeks, did not look very good in week 3. Meanwhile, Ta'amu, again, game manager type. We've seen that in the NFL be successful. Mm-hmm. He's really been a complete quarterback for St. Louis.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing here, is that I don't want to jump down Cardale Jones' throat. It could be just one bad week in the end, but you got to take everything in whole. And he put up a 4-interception performance in a game where you were going to be challenged. You had an LA team who was chomping at the bit of getting their first win at home. He's back in LA, where he spent some time with the Chargers in the NFL, so there should have been some comfortability there. And to come out, throw the 4 interceptions, and really do nothing for your team, it looked like at the end of the first half they had a chance to really get things going. They got on the board, and then it just was very much back to reality in the second half of the beginning. And so I don't want to jump him down too far down in the rankings, because I do believe he's still one of the most talented quarterbacks in this league, and I still believe he will be playing at the NFL level after this season. But there's no doubting that Jordan Ta'amu has been the more consistent player and has been, he didn't have to do it last week, but the first 2 weeks was a big reason why they were in the game or won the game.
And it's interesting with Ta'amu, when you compare him to P.J. Walker, it's kind of a similarity that we saw in the Super Bowl between Patrick Mahomes and Jimmy Garoppolo, where one guy is very much the gunslinger, has a cannon for an arm, wins the game on his own. The other's more of a game manager. Ta'amu fits that mold, but is still leading a very successful offense.
Absolutely, and honestly, he's shown signs that he can do more than game manage. You saw in that game with the Roughnecks, he was making plays down the field that with his feet and with his arm to put them in winning positions. And the difference between him and P.J. Walker, like you said, is if you want to say P.J. Walker has that like Mahomes factor that you mentioned, he does. He can make every throw, and we've seen it. And it's not just that one throw that you're seeing on the internet where you throw sidearm. He's making all those kinds of throws. He has pressure in his face. He's winning games with his arm, and he's rejuvenating that team in such a way that only a star quarterback can.
And now let's talk about the guy who's in there at number 4, Josh Johnson. Now, again, he missed week 1, came in week 2, and we saw him, as well as Landry Jones, who's at number 5, struggle in the first half of that game in week 2. Second half, picked up a little bit. Last week, Johnson was on fire for LA. This was a totally different dude, throwing the ball long, short, tight windows. Is he creeping up the rankings, maybe into that top 2 or 3 conversation for you?
Absolutely. And honestly, if he was there from week 1 and was showing this type of progression, he probably would be there now. But it's only one full game, so he's going to have to give more because PJ's given 3, Cardell's given 2, and Time was given pretty much 2.5. So if Josh Johnson could play like he did last week and be that type of dominant type force, making every throw down the field and really leading that team. And the difference with Josh Johnson and a lot of these other good quarterbacks in this league is that he's making these reads, you could tell, on the field by himself. He's not really relying a lot on the coaching staff to make the calls. He's making the calls, and that just comes with the experience being a 30-plus-year-old quarterback in this league and a guy who spent a lot of times 13 different NFL football teams. So it definitely shows, but his skill level is definitely could at the end of the season put him in the top 3, especially if LA keeps winning.
It's going to be interesting to watch, too, some of these other quarterbacks. Tampa Bay showed some good help with Flowers. Be interesting to see if he creeps up in your power rankings as we go forward, if the coaching staff takes the reins off of him and lets him go. When we return, Troy Anthony will join me to break down the Saturday action, and Scott Churchton will give his impressions on Week 4. So stay right here on XFL Game Day.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Ninth and Lux. Visit the website ninethandlux.com and check out the clothing gallery. Do You Music with featured artist IW and his latest album, Season 2. You can check that out on iTunes as well as doyoumusic.com. Nesby Phipps, Art, Life, Entertainment, nesbyphipps.com. Grind It Out Fitness. Visit the website grinditoutfitness.com and download the app.
What is going on, XFL fans? I'm Scott Churchton with what thus far has been a feel-good story. One thing people talk about in sports is lineage, the pressure to live up to your family name when one of your parents has a professional sports career of their own. Recent Super Bowl MVP Pat Mahomes is an example. His father played 11 years in Major League Baseball, or Cody Bellinger and his father Clay. But on the other side, you have Patrick Ewing Jr., who only played 7 games in the NBA, or Barry Sanders Jr., Jerry Rice Jr., Michael Jordan's sons Marcus and Jeffrey, and so on. It's been a tough start to the pro career of Austin Proehl. The son of 17-year NFL dad Ricky Proehl was signed by the Buffalo Bills in May of 2018, only to be cut 3.5 months later. The next day, he was signed by Tennessee and cut the day after that. 6 weeks later, signed by the LA Rams, released less than a year later. 15 months, released from 3 teams, but still just 23 years old. Fast forward to 2020 and the Seattle Dragons. 3 games in, he currently leads the Dragons in catches, receiving yards, has 3 of the team's 5 receiving touchdowns, including the first ever touchdown in XFL history, and right now is getting the attention of pro scouts thanks to the popularity of the XFL and a national stage. Who knows if this will continue, but this is what the XFL can bring to the table. A chance for the Proehls and the PJ Walkers out there to get the attention inside the United States and work their way back to the NFL level. Let's hope it continues. I'm Scott Churchton. Stay tuned right here for more coverage of XFL Game Day, and stay awesome.
Welcome back to XFL Game Day. David Hassagen now joined by Troy Anthony. And Troy, Week 3 was explosive. We started to see the offenses really come alive. Some unexpected results as well. So now Week 4 certainly will have a lot of interest to it. We're now getting into the heart of the season, and the kinks have been worked out for these teams that they had from the offseason. Let's start with the first game on Saturday at MetLife Stadium. We will be there for the New York Guardians hosting the LA Wildcats, 2 p.m. on ABC. Two teams going in complete opposite directions, and the problems keep piling up for New York. Matt McGloin goes down with an injury, and both Marquise Williams and Luis Perez get a shot at the reins without much effect. What should we be watching with the Guardians have the ball? Because right now, we don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be.
And that's the biggest question. You know, McGloin went down with the ribs, but then Williams came in, had 94 yards passing. Perez came in. He led the sole touchdown drive, the first offensive touchdowns from Week 1 in the XFL. So that's the biggest question. Who is going to be at the helm? But regardless who it is, this offense needs to start producing because they haven't done so at all to this point this season. Even in that Week 1 victory against the Vipers, the offense was kind of stagnant. The defense ran that game for them.
Exactly. And now we talk about LA, though. Josh Johnson, now that he's been working with this offense more and more, the comfortability level is just sky high. New York's defense has been solid, though. It's been worn down just because they've been on the field so much. Johnson will have his hands full with a pretty good secondary and a linebacking core that's pretty active. What should we be watching for when LA gets the football?
I look for Johnson's progression. He missed Week 1, came in Week 2, he lost, but then last week he connected with McBride. You thought that Spruce was the #1 target. McBride went off last week for 2 touchdowns. Now Johnson has 2 legit weapons. Also with that running game excelling, Johnson has a lot of weapons around him, and this could be a long game for the Guardians.
Who wins this game and why? It sounds like you've got a lean toward LA.
I do have a lean toward LA, and the reason is that the quarterback for the Guardians is the biggest question. Who is it going to be? And regardless who it is, like I said, they still haven't produced. And it looks like this LA team is getting better week to week. And now that McBride is in the mix with Spruce, McBride, and Carter at the running back position, LA has a lot of weapons for Josh Johnson, who's only improving.
Meanwhile, the Guardians are going to have to figure out how to open up the playbook for whoever the quarterback is. Otherwise, nothing's going to be happening. Let's get into the second game of the day, 5 p.m. on Fox for this one. The Seattle Dragons visiting the Thunderdome to take on St. Louis. The Dragons' defense has been there since Week 1, but it's the offense that's been really sputtering. How does Silvers and co. break through this Battlehawks defense, which has been solid from the entire season?
This is going to be on Silvers because he's been one of the most iffy quarterbacks so far in the XFL. So if he can actually lock down, find his targets, make his reads, and get the receivers the ball. He's looked very panicky at times. He needs to get that under lock if they're going to have any chance against this Battlehawks team.
And this is going to be in front of a crowd that we saw it last week, almost 30,000 in the Dome in St. Louis. I think they missed football just a little bit, just a bit. So we'll see how he deals with that noise. Meanwhile, we talked about it earlier in the show. The Battlehawks attack has really been led on the ground. They have so many weapons, though, on this offense. They make them near impossible to stop, starting with Jordan Ta'amu. But the running game, as I said, they have a stable of backs. They go 3 deep. Really, you don't see that much in the XFL.
They're sort of like the Baltimore Ravens of the XFL. The running game runs the team. You know, the quarterback contributes as well. Going into last week, Ta'amu was up there in the rushing in the league with over 100 yards, and he only added 13 yards on the ground this past week against the Guardians. But Matt Jones excelled. Michael excelled. So if they can stop the Battlehawks running game, they might have a chance in this one. But if not, it could be a long day as well.
Could be a very long day. How do you see this one going? Because, again, Seattle's defense is going to keep them in this ball game. The question is, can Silver stand up? How do you see it?
I think it'll be close for the first 3 quarters, but then the Battlehawks are going to end up, that running game is going to tire out that Dragons defense, and the running game is going to win the Battlehawks the game. And
it's going to be interesting to watch, especially in terms of the quarterback situation. We mentioned it in the first half of the show. How long do they stick with Silvers? Because he's really been the only quarterback that hasn't been questioned yet. But B.J. Daniels is sitting right behind him, a veteran. He might be the guy that has to lead them going forward. We'll have to keep an eye on that one to be sure.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Financial Coaching LLC, Investment, Retirement, Security. Stewardship Credit. Financial growth is in your hands. StewardshipCredit.com. Adrienne Marie Photo. Photographer, writer, management. AdrienneMariePhotography.com. Lock Multimedia.
Welcome back to XFL Game Day. I'm Troy Anthony, bringing you XFL's Week 4 Best Bets. In our first matchup on 2 o'clock on Saturday, we have the LA Wildcats heading to take on the New York Guardians. Quarterback for the Wildcats, Josh Johnson, missed the first week, but since coming in week 2, he's been electric. Now, he's found 2 major weapons in Spruce and McBride, and the running game has done well as well. For the New York Guardians, who knows what that quarterback situation is looking like? McGloin went down last week with rib injury, and it took Luis Perez and Williams to come in to finish the game out for the Guardians. In this one, with the questions at quarterback, I like the Wildcats on the money line at minus 315. In the second matchup on Saturday at 5 o'clock, we have the St. Louis Battlehawks taking on the Seattle Dragons. St. Louis was rocking last week in their first home game. You could tell that city really missed their professional football. And their team is pretty good as well, with Te'amu leading the attack. At quarterback, he's a dynamic rusher and can also sling the rock. Seattle has questions at quarterback with Silvers. That being said, I like the Battlehawks here with the spread at minus 12. Huge spread, but I think the Battlehawks still cover it. In our Sunday slate of games, the 4 o'clock matchup, we have the Houston Roughnecks against the Dallas Renegades in Dallas. The Roughnecks look like one of the top teams in the league, led by P.J. Walker. That Walker to Phillips connection is electric, both of them being named the Week 1 and Week 2 Players of the Week. In this one, the Roughnecks are actually the underdog, so I'm jumping over that spread. Houston minus 1 at Dallas. In our last game on Sunday, we have a 7 o'clock matchup between the DC Defenders and the Tampa Bay Vipers. The DC Defenders kind of got stumped last week against the LA Wildcats, but I look for Cardale Jones to bounce back in this one big. I'm taking the DC Defenders in Tampa Bay on the money line at minus 110. With your best bets for the XFL Week 4, I'm Troy Anthony.
Alex Marinoni now back with me, and it's time to break down the Sunday action, starting with a battle in the Lone Star State. Dallas looks to slow down what seems like an unstoppable Houston offense. This game, 4 p.m. on FS1. P.J. Walker has shattered all expectations in the early going and has so many weapons around him. Meanwhile, this Dallas team does bring a pretty good defense to the table. What should we be looking for when Houston has the ball?
When Houston has the ball, it's obviously key one, stop P.J. Walker. Teams haven't been getting taken advantage of by James Butler in this running game at all. The only time you see them really get going is when P.J. Walker is really going. So priority one is to stop P.J. Walker. I know that's easier said than done, but it's at least contain him. Don't let him get those big plays. If you can keep P.J. Walker in the pocket and take away all the deep threats, let him try to work underneath, you may be able to slip into one as far as the defense goes. And like you said, Dallas has a very good defense. They may be able to take one if he makes one mistake.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Dallas found an identity last week in their win over Seattle. They found a new favorite weapon, too, in Donald Parham. How can Houston stop this monstrous tight end? He's standing at 6'8".
Yeah, there's getting a guy who's 6'8" who can run and jump just like him. That's the only way I see. I mean, you're going to have to chip him at the line. I know they spread him out, so you're going to have to get handsy with Parham. You're going to have to slow him down off the beat. If you let him get a free release, he's going to make big plays like he has been the last couple of weeks. A big thing, though, for the Roughnecks is, yes, Parham is a very good player. Landry Jones is an experienced quarterback, but what we've noticed in the second half of these games is Cameron Artis-Payne and Lance Dunbar taking over the game. If you're Houston, you need to contain those guys, force Landry Jones to throw the ball 50 times a game, because if he throws the ball 50 times, good chances 3 or 4 of them are going into your hands.
Now, how do you see this game going? Because obviously you want to see Dallas use the running game a little bit more in the first half, but you still have to shut down the P.J. Walker-Phillips connection. That one for Houston has been money.
Yeah, this is going to be a good game. I don't think you're going to see very much what the Roughnecks and the Vipers had last week. I feel like it's going to be a very back and forth, offensively driven game. But I can't go against the Roughnecks right now. They're, in my opinion, the most complete team in the league. The defense and the offense complement each other so well. And until someone can do it, I'm just going to ride the P.J. Walker train until he proves that he can make a mistake in this league.
Let's move to the last game on Sunday. The last game of Week 4 comes in Tampa. The Vipers hosting the D.C. Defenders, 7 p.m., ESPN2 for this one. Tampa Bay came close to winning last week, and after D.C.'s defense was shattered last week, it looks like a good time for Vipers to get win number 1. But it seems like they just have to get out of their own way. What is the key that we're going to look for when the Vipers have the ball? Because they look good under Quentin Flowers.
Yeah, it's stick with a quarterback and go with him. And if you're going to do the platoon route, a route that I never really agree with, but if that's the best feeling you have for your team, then be consistent. If you're going to pull Flowers out a 2-minute drill for Taylor Cornelius, it worked out for them in the 2-minute drill. They scored the touchdown last week against the Roughnecks. But then in the red zone, when you needed a touchdown, Quentin Flowers' strength, and you're on a team that has Patrick and Smith, who are both in the top 5 in the league in rushing at the time, you run the football. Dropping back 3 times with Cornelius in the red zone is not going to help you win this game. If they stick with a consistent approach with that, or just give the reins to Quentin Flowers, they have a good chance of not only upsetting them, but winning big.
And obviously this is a DC defense, though, that is going to be very, very angry with how they performed last week. Also didn't get much help. So let's talk about what happens when DC has the ball. Cardale Jones, again, we talked about it earlier in the show, looked very good the first 2 weeks. Did not look like he had his game at all in week 3. How does he bounce back in this one? Is there certain adjustments that he has to make, or can he take advantage of a Vipers defense that really is pretty porous?
Yeah, that's the biggest question here, because we haven't seen Cardale Jones lose in his entire college and professional career. So his bounce back is going to be something nobody's ever seen before at that rate. But I think he's going to come out, like you said, angry, just like the rest of this team. They were embarrassed last week going to LA. This is going to be a big time for them and it's a big moment for Cardale and this team to show that they have some resiliency and to get back in line in the East, because right now the Battlehawks don't look like they're going anywhere. So if you want to gain control of this East, they know that they're going to have to take care of games like the Vipers.
Who takes the win in this one and why?
It's going to be DC because of what I just said. I think they are going to have to, they know what this means for the playoffs. They know the Battlehawks are a legit team and could be the most complete team in this division, let alone the whole league. So they can't let us slip up like the Vipers happen. Now, LA looks like a playoff caliber team out in the West, so it's not embarrassing to that sense, but the fact that they got just roughed up the way they did, they're definitely going to come out with a different attitude this week.
Going to be interesting to watch that match for sure. And that will do it for XFL Game Day. Don't forget to check us out on iTunes and SoundCloud on the XFL Game Day podcast, where we break down the week that was and look in depth at all the topics of note in the XFL. And go to footballgameplan.com for all of our coverage of the XFL, college football, and our NFL draft coverage and rankings. It's where football makes sense. For all of us here at Football Game Plan, I'm David Hassagen saying thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.